for joining us today. On behalf of Progressive AE, I want to also thank the SIOR for extending the opportunity to share. We're pleased to host the event, and we're excited to share some perspectives that we believe will enhance your knowledge and ability to serve your clientele, particularly in these turbulent times. We see this as a rich opportunity to explore ways we can work together. Together, we think we can help clients find the right location, create space that makes place, place that inspires, drives performance, and becomes a destination where people want to spend their time. So it becomes an attractor for you, for clients, for us, for opportunities, and makes a better community to work in. By way of a general introduction, I would like to just tell you a little about Progressive. You see on your screen right now the markets that we serve. We're a diverse company, been in business for over 55 years. We have a national reach, work all across the country. We have received over 120 design awards for our solutions. We have a direct employment of 230 people in 4 different offices. And we have resources through one global design alliance of 1,500 people in 27 offices and an international reach. We account among our repeat clients a number of nationally renowned names ranging from Steelcase to Amazon, and have top quality experience in workplace and industrial markets. So as I said before, our focus today is workplace. And we'd like your feedback on how this goes. Let's talk a little bit quickly here about an overview of the day. Certainly this is a pivotal time, but change offers opportunity to be creative and come up with new solutions that generate and create business. So we see this as a really important time to have this kind of a conversation. Today we have a series of 3 very compact presentations of 10 or so minutes apiece that focus on workplace. We would do a Q&A. As Shelby pointed out, you have opportunities to submit questions through the chat window if you would like throughout the day. And then after those presentations, we would field some of those questions for additional insight. Then toward the end, and as time allows, we have the ability to break this group into a series of breakout rooms where we could network a little bit and chat further to collect information about your feedback on the day. The goal is to actually have this be news you can use, so to speak. So years ago, I remember someone saying, you know, when I do an event, or go to an event, I want you to tell me something I need to know, entertain and inspire me, then let me go. So we're not going to stretch this out. We hope to be compact and intensive and valuable to you. Let's see here. Let's do a quick introduction of the team. Again, I'm David Shull there. You see that in the upper left. Kim Marks leads our workplace practice. Melissa Malburg, Senior Interior Designer, is making a presentation today, and Ken Brandsen is Senior Project Manager with combined experience in our field as well as real estate. Supporting the team then, you heard at the beginning, Shelby St. Gelais as Business Development Manager, and Tom Short is also with us in a companion role for Grand Rapids as Business Development Manager. Jim Horman is joining us as a Community Practice Leader, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with him. So as we get set up, again, just a reminder that as a standard, everyone but the speaker will be muted. So use the chat box to ask questions or provide any feedback. In addition, we have a little fast feedback opportunity today through polling. And then Shelby, if you could help us pop up just a test question here. You can see there on your screen, I believe now, popped up overlaying our presentation, a little window with a question in it. This is just a test question to make sure things are working. So if you would quickly, about 15 seconds here, answer that question, and we will then show polling and see how that comes out and make sure, I'm sure that you can see, I think it's a dynamic response now as people reply. Well, it's interesting here. It looks like we've got about 9 responses. I know that the progressive team is specifically disallowed from responding. So these are purely the attendees today who are responding to the poll here. Well, it looks like a pretty uniform distribution. And I guess I'm not going to ask which ones wear the sweatpants. So looks like it's working, Shelby. Thank you very much. Let's move on with our program today. I think I need to probably clear that off my screen. And so let's begin.
All right. So
Kim Marks, I'm going to pass over the baton to you. Kim is out of our Charlotte office and leads our workplace practice for the entire firm. And she is prepared to talk about how buildings impact people and introduction into workplace design, planning, and evolution. So Kim, it's all yours. Thank you for your presentation today.
great. So we thought we would start today by sharing our approach to workplace design. We believe that buildings impact people, and we think this is important to consider as we all re-enter the workplace. Oh, how did I kick us out? There we go. Sorry about that. So we'll start real quick, just taking a quick look at the workplace evolution. In the bottom left-hand corner is from the 1940s. It was the first start of a bullpen, a classic bullpen, very efficient, but not very much privacy. And we moved to the 1960s, where we had a much more fluid landscape, very organic, which led us to the 1980s, where I entered into the workforce and saw the cube farm. And I remember my first desk. It was, the panels were very high. It was full of privacy, but not very functional. And then the bottom right-hand corner is the, we had today, very open, very transparent, breaking down the barriers. But the question, as we all know, at the forefront of everyone's mind right now is, where do we go from here? Well, let's start with how we used to approach workplace. Was very traditional. If you had 100 people, we had 100 desks. Then we had a few managers' offices and a few meeting rooms interlaced in that. But with the rise of technology, we became very mobile. And this is where we really saw the first shift in how the workplace environment was thought of. So now, when we look at how mobile we are, if you have those same 100 employees, you might have 80 desks, fewer offices, and then a few meeting rooms on top of that. We would replace those extra seats with some alternate work areas. We might incorporate some lockers. We'd still have a few offices and a few meeting rooms. But what was not incorporated into that was, what do the people really want? What do our employees need to work? We know that from people, everybody is different. We all have different work styles. We all have different personalities. And especially now, having worked at home, I think those become very apparent, that we all need different things as we work through the day. So to think about, we took a step back and looked at the top Fortune 500 companies. And this list that you see in front of you are the top 10, and they're separated by revenue. Then we also took a look at the Fortune 500 list of best companies to work for. And it was interesting, when you look at these two lists side by side, there's not a single company that crosses both lists. So we wanted to dive into a little bit about what the difference was in these. And the Fortune 500, the list by revenue is based on revenue, but what is it about the top 10 companies, best places to work? What is the difference? What's the driver there? So to gain some insight, we went to look at some of the employee comments from the best places to work to gain insight about what employees were seeing. And when you lay over how that responds to a work environment, you find that employers are giving employees a richer sense of richer experience, which leads to a greater sense of purpose and a deeper connection to the organization. We believe that there's a better way to design to support this deeper connection between employee and organization. And it starts if you consider how we engage in the office throughout the day and the various tasks that we do. If we layer in settings that support the individual work styles. So if we start with the mobile work environment that we examined a few minutes ago, and we look through the lens of how an organization works and their strategic focus, we can then start to allocate spaces around that. And then the environment really supports what the people need to perform their tasks. And we find that we provide a greater sense of purpose to the space, which almost always leads to a greater sense of community. And then this leads to a stronger culture, innovative and engaged community within the office. We have seen great success in using this approach over the years with our workspace clients. We believe in the value that the office brings to the organization. However, we do know that with what we're all experiencing right now, the impacts of COVID-19, we will see some changes. And I think that it's up to each organization to really look at what they need the office environment to be for them. We know that some of our clients are trying to figure out if they can work from home and how they might incorporate that into their organization today. So we believe there will be lots of changes. It's unsure exactly what that looks like, but it will be upon us here shortly as we all return to work.
Okay, thank you, Kim. I think at this point, Shelby, we have a couple of polling questions like our test case before the presentation. So if you want to go ahead and pop those up. While you're responding to those questions, I was looking at what you presented there, Kim, and it's evident that people are wearing a whole different lens as they look at office space right now, whether it's what they're doing presently or as they seek new space, more or less, or different. They're going to need some help with visualizing, I would think, how future space opportunities are going to compare with what they need to do, given the change of nature of how we're going to work together. How would you suggest that realtors look at helping their clients evaluate space or figure out how to compare unequal options more equally?
I think one of the best ways is to use our team as a tool in their pocket. When they're first talking to clients, we are available to go on site with them to help visualize the space. But even before actually touring spaces, a 15, 30-minute conversation online to get everybody on the same page and talking about what this space really needs to address to an organization will be very helpful.
Okay, so in a sense, that visualization process could be a place where we maybe pair up with folks like the realtors here to help with early visualization and triaging, ranking and so on, different opportunities for clients. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. It's great initial insight. I want to drill down just a little bit on what are we learning rapidly here through the process of how current state conditions are affecting thought. And our next presentation, Melissa Malburg, our senior interior designer, is prepared to give us some insight that we've begun to collect and is still an active collection base. So Melissa's senior interior designer has over 15 years experience in the field and a broad variety of experiences in workplace. And what she would like to share with you is some insights we've been gaining through our One Global Alliance, which she's going to describe in a little more detail and walk you through what we have been learning in terms of a survey of that particular group. Melissa, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And hello, everybody. It's nice to see some of you and be able to connect in a unique way when we're used to being able to have events like this in person. As David mentioned, Progressive is a member of One Global Design, which is a network of 20 corporate architecture and design firms in the United States, Canada, Mexico, India, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. Collectively, we rank as the second largest corporate architecture and design firm in the world, with more than 1,500 design professionals, and that's according to Interior Design Magazine's annual Giants list. We also tap a network of talent that broadens our vision and widens our reach, helping our clients achieve ambitious goals. So as part of the workplace strategy team in One Global Design, we watched this COVID-19 pandemic unfold and saw firsthand the impacts on our communities and similar communities around the world. We saw a place to plug in our collective expertise and provide some constructive insight into the future of work from a human-centric perspective. So we decided to launch a survey to study this further. We opened a first phase of our survey in early April to all of our One Global Design employees across the world. We believe that people's expectations on the workplace are shifting and faster than ever before. So our intent for this study is to gain a deeper understanding of these shifts as organizations prepare to open their doors again. We focused on people's relationship to their work and how needs, perceptions, and styles may have changed based on their time working at home. So to do this, we focused on 5 key areas: health and well-being, workflow, technology, tools, management style, and change readiness. So I'm going to walk you through our results to this preliminary study. And again, this was of our internal One Global Design partner employees. We have a second phase of this study that's open right now. So we will be sending you a link to that survey if you would like to participate. We'd love your insight. And we'll be sharing results of this second wave of the survey probably later in June. For everybody's awareness. We'd like to keep taking some test surveys throughout, maybe late summer, early fall, as people have spent maybe a little bit more time back in the office and understanding, again, how our perceptions continue to shift as all of this is so unique. We haven't been through anything like this before. So on to the results. Health and well-being was the first topic that we looked at. It's not a new topic. It's been something that has been on the forefront of people's minds for a while. But now that we've blurred the lines between work and personal lives even further, working from home, people can be more connected 24/7, and it's definitely taking a toll. On a positive note, despite times of uncertainty, people are remaining hopeful and finding ways to stay focused and productive. And we're seeing that staying healthy and balanced is definitely a top priority for people as they look for ways to exercise, maintain personal connections, and unplug from technology. Related to workflow, higher levels of autonomy in the workday as we work from home has given a lot of people the opportunity to learn more about themselves and what they need to do their best, despite the possibilities of maybe only being able to work from one spot in their home or having caretaker responsibilities or other things that are unique to their day. As we move back to working from the office, we see that a lot of people want to be able to maintain flexibility for more of a work-life integration versus things being too blurred and work taking too much of our time. The survey shows us that many have gained a clear understanding of activities that are best supported in the office and what can be accomplished well at home. And while the autonomy of home is better suited to focused and concentrated work, we desire the interaction, socialization, teamwork we experienced with in-person engagement in the office. This is supported by our desire to find a balance and stay productive, but still maintain personal connections. Connecting virtually in less formal contexts has also brought a greater sense of empathy and understanding for one another. We've seen each other's homes and met each other's pets and kids. We believe that we'll be more accepting of life demands on our coworkers once we go back to a more formal setting. Technology has obviously been one of the largest differentiators for how we're responding to and coping with this pandemic. Even before physical distancing, we could work, connect with others, learn, read, watch, share anywhere, anytime, any way we choose. So while we've been physically restricted to home, technology has made us feel more connected with teams and has provided better access to our leadership. Video conferencing while everyone's remote has kind of leveled the playing field. So participants who are used to being one of the remote minority are enjoying having an equal seat at the table. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of Zoom fatigue. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that as well. Anxiety about increased noise levels, especially if coworkers start conducting more Zoom meetings when they return to the open office if they're not using headsets. One surprising finding is that most everyone who took the survey had to learn new technology in the transition to working 100% remote. We anticipated geography and generations having some impact on technology adoption, but this is another area where apparently the pandemic impacted all of us to a pretty equal degree. Relative to tools, we definitely saw some shifting thinking as people have experienced new ways of working at home. They're learning what they need to be most effective, and many are realizing that they can do without a desk phone and preference of internet-based communication methods. And they're also open, surprisingly, to trading an assigned desk for greater flexibility in where and how they work, with one main caveat. People still desire a sense of place and belonging that comes from an owned workspace and the ability to store items and personalize their space. Clarity on what might be afforded and how to find a shared space would help ease transition for some of the people that might see a more shared space in the future. Of course, that's in the future. We saw surprisingly few comments related to cleanliness and concerns associated with shared spaces, especially amidst conversations about virus transmission when we start to return to the office. Our short-term expectation is that we'll see the need to limit use of shared space just to help with limiting the virus transmission. And then planning in the long term for adjustments to workplace strategy that fits with the organization's overall goals in appropriate work styles, relative especially to shared spaces in giving up desks. So change readiness really describes an individual or an organization's aptitude for change. In general, survey responses show a positive outlook on change and that individuals feel positively about their organization's ability to adapt to change. Based on the survey results, we think transparent communication and responsiveness were key contributors to these reactions. So frequent check-ins, increased technology usage have all provided a level playing field to connect with leadership and teammates. Most respondents would like to see continued frequent communication and have more check-ins with a clear agenda and a purpose. This transparency and communication can help alleviate stress and anxiety about their work or what maybe to anticipate as they see changes on the horizon. So our One Global Design employees have gained clarity through this disruption of what they need to be productive, and an overwhelming majority desire the flexibility to maintain these new workflows as we transition back into the physical office. As we reviewed survey results, a few key ideas surfaced. The crisis has humanized our views of each other, and we've gained a greater empathy for demands of personal lives. More than ever, we desire a clear boundary between work and personal lives. Also, we've appreciated additional flexibility with our schedule, no commutes, getting more exercise, maybe being able to play with kids and pets throughout the day. We do desire human connections and have gained clarity that certain activities are best in person, while some can be done just as well or maybe better remotely. And then finding ways to stay productive and learning that not everything needs to be done in the office. So it's been said too often already, but these are unprecedented times. the uncertainty of rate of change and the stress that we're feeling will not go away as we move into this long transition back to work or back to the office. A lot of us have been working, right? And we know that our return to normal likely won't look even as it did before. So it's important for us to focus on data, tactical planning, make sure that we have a good plan in place. But we believe that a human-centric approach to the future of work will have a positive and innovative impacts on how successfully organizations are able to move forward.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Couple of questions. One, if I understood you, there's a second phase of this survey that's open and available. And by the way, Shelby, while we're talking here, go ahead and pull up the polling questions. There's a second phase of this survey that folks could access and sort of join the pool of data with their own insights. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So the second wave of the survey is open right now. We'll send you the survey result or the survey link so you can participate. I think Shelby will post it in the chat later on in our time together today, and then we'll also follow up with an email to all the participants with a link to how to participate that. And feel free to share with your colleagues. If you have clients or partners that might be interested in participating, this is open to anybody that's interested in taking the survey.
Yeah, well, so I have one just thing that occurred to me as you were presenting. The data and insights were sort of all across the board. Are they doing anything through teasing the data to try to sector it by generational component from, you know, millennials or Gen X or, you know, baby boomers and so on in regard to this? Or is that not a part of that sort of collection of insight?
That's a good question. We are collecting demographic information at the end of the survey, just in case, you know, regionally, because this is open globally. Regionally, we assume there might be some differences generationally, size of organization, maybe if it's a multi-location organization versus a single location. All of that theoretically would have impact on how people might feel as they work from home and then as they return to the office. We were surprised that provided very little distinction in the One Global survey, but we are one market sector. We're architecture and design. So as we open up to other industries, we'll see again if that demographic information has any impact on how people respond to the questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Melissa. It's a really intriguing thing. I think we've all seen in Zoom meetings the uptake of some folks in terms of just adapting to it and other folks struggling more with it. And it'd be interesting to see what that sort of feedback in terms of impact of return to work is like. Well, let's move on to our third presentation here, and that's Ken Brandsen, our Senior Project Manager in Workplace. We thought it might be interesting to get more to the applied or examples at a tactical level of what return to work might look like. And so Ken is here to present some actual case study examples of space use strategies and tactics. Ken has been in workplace world both with our firm and also in real estate facilities on behalf of people who produce product. So we appreciate your perspective, Ken, and take it away.
All right, thanks, David, and good morning, everyone. I guess you could say I'm a recovering facilities and real estate professional from a former manufacturer, but in my role at Progressive and working with our workplace clients and specific to return to work, we've got some influencers that have affected how we look at space, and those are some of the ones you would expect, whether it's federal, state, and local, certainly the CDC and the guidelines that are there, though ever changing. Organizationally, certainly there's influencers there too, and this really gets into more of the policy and procedures within a given organization, how they might address individuals who have further care needs, whether that be for kids or for others, and how they're balancing some of those aspects in their life may influence how you might return to work. The more practical side of it really is looking at the spatial side of it and using some of the CDC guidelines and applying that to to space. So we'd like to share our phase one or initial approach with several of those options, and just walk through and share our rationale on how we're doing that. So space number one, let me give you a little orientation here. So this is the 5th floor of a leased facility. And so a place to start would be, if you can see my mouse up here in the upper right, where the elevator core is, and upon arrival to the building. And we're looking at a couple of different things. The first is the sort of green paths that you see outlined. These are paths that are greater than 6 feet. So areas perhaps where you could see two-way travel throughout a given space. Then the next indicator is this green-blue color. And that's one where we might have to consider a one-way path. Those are 6 feet or less in width. And really looking at how we might travel through the space and to access the different areas, both the exits as well as the entry, and guiding folks in that regard. The circles that you see represent a 12-foot diameter around an individual, and this exceeds maybe the typical guideline of 6 feet of distance. Knowing that folks move around and that it's not going to be a perfect science, we really use this as our standard for looking at the individual workstations and where we could have occupancy and where we might have some empty seats. We also applied that same logic to some of the conference areas and some of the larger gathering and collaborative areas. And you can see the numbers that are placed there, where a larger conference room now is usable by 4 individuals, some of the other spaces by 2. And then we've got 2 other areas represented in sort of the pink and red colors. Some limited space use by individuals or occupants. So maybe those are service areas or specific staff only. And then lastly, looking at the restrooms and how we might apply some of the distancing. So you can see the red X of closing down a couple of toilet room stalls in those areas, again, to maintain some physical distancing. So the summary for space number one, with an occupancy capacity of 58, the initial phase is looking at a target density of 35. The next example is a standalone building, similar to the lease space, looking at more of the arrival sequence. So this is one where we're entering directly off from the parking area. Again, similar logic here in looking at those pathways that are greater than 6 feet that we could consider as our primary path, and perhaps even where folks would be two-way travel. The next level of circulation is those that are less than 6 feet. And this we had to look at, since this is a 2-story facility, at stairways as well, and looking at areas where we might have a one-way flow to access the floor above. And then even in looking at one of our collaborative areas up in the upper left, where we might pass through that space when it's not in use to allow some greater flexibility of folks passing through the office. Additionally, the enclosed or more collaborative environments, applying that same 12-foot diameter circle, and the occupancies that you see there in some of the enclosed spaces and some of the partially enclosed spaces. Individual work areas, again, much like in the open workspace environment of limiting where we would have folks during that first initial phase. And then even looking at some who are even more remote than others, working out in the field on a regular basis and taking some of the smaller collaborative meeting spaces and identifying those as initial primary work areas when those individuals are in the building. And then lastly, we have some of those sort of restricted areas. So closing off, say, a fitness area as an example, our a print room area or a service area where deliveries might happen, and supplies no longer being accessible to everyone, but having a process for getting those supplies from individuals and requesting those. So here our capacity again for this floor plate 86, and our initial density is 52. Then the last example is one really where we wanted to understand, well, how might we apply this to an area where we have a significant private offices. So this is a probable path that could be taken for this space. This is also a standalone building with 2 levels. So looking at the entry sequence again off the parking deck, and having those larger, wider areas of path, but then quickly going down to more of a one-way travel to access the different offices and spaces that might be on this level. You can see we have several toilet room facilities here and more of a unisex approach, so there's less restriction in how we've applied this logic to those areas. On the upper floor then too, continuing with more of the wider, greater than 6 foot pathways, as well as less than 6 foot paths, and identifying some one-way travel throughout, again with some of the meeting areas, limiting those based on that 12-foot diameter circle, and then applying to the private offices. And while you might suggest each office is separated by a wall, perhaps there's a reason to go every other office for that initial phase. Again, this is more of a probable approach to how you might occupy this one. And part of that depends again on how the organization is going to look at individuals and what their needs might be and their level of comfort in the space. In summary here, the 43 total capacity and perhaps a target density in that initial phase of 26. So applying the logic to all 3 of these, it's fairly straightforward, and one that really prioritizes on staff safety and security. And many times this is real and perceived. We've looked at some of the physical aspects of that real safety and security, and with physical distancing. Perceived might be into areas of more HR policy and HR conversation around health and welfare of individuals and what their level of comfort is for returning to the office, as well as some of the practical things that they're balancing back home. But this is an area where you would probably value on comfort over efficiency for that initial phase, and making sure that folks are comfortable, that they are feel like they're being heard. And then the open communication, much like I'm sure your organizations, and it's true for ours, when we had our initial stay-at-home order, there was a high degree of communication on a regular basis, just to touch base. They weren't long, but they were connecting with team members and with individuals to make sure that technology is working, to make sure that they can do the work that they have in front of them, and to help remove barriers. No different in that initial return to work, and maintaining that open communication, whether that's again through the use of Zoom and Microsoft Teams and other areas, but continue to maintain that. And then lastly, it's just remaining flexible and adaptable. The survey results indicate that future is somewhat unknown. There's a desire and an importance towards wanting to be back in the office. And I think I've heard it best by an individual who talked about, over the past 10, 12 weeks, we've been all about human doing, and we need to get back to human being. Part of that human being is connecting again socially and being face-to-face with individuals. And while we may not be able to do that just yet, we're a little out of balance in terms of that desire to do that. So that's really where we see returning in the long term. But initially, this is our take at those examples.
Well, thank you, Ken. Shelby, let's go ahead and pull up the polling question. And while that's happening, was thinking through what you presented there. You shared examples of how the occupants might approach using their space. For lease examples, what things are landlords and building owners evaluating on behalf of or for the tenants and occupants?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm sure many on the call here too have already had some conversations on behalf of their clients with those landlords and owners. But similar to organizations and business entities, the expectation should be for a COVID policy. How is the landlord or the owner looking at their facility? How are they working to ensure the safety and security of tenants, whether that be through additional signage? Certainly cleaning protocols would be an expectation that would be amped up and much higher than what you would see. Looking at some of the common area amenities and saying which of those areas can be open and might they be open for only limited use with limited number of people, or which areas are even closed. And then I would also expect to work through with landlords what the delivery policies might be and how I might still connect with visitors. And part of that's a personal question for the organization as well, to say, are we even taking visitors during that initial phase? But when that occurs, again, it's going to be an open dialogue with landlords, building managers, and owners to ensure that their policies, their procedures, and their practices are in place, and that as an organization, as a tenant, you can be aligned with that and work together to ensure the overall safety and security of your employees and occupants.
Thanks, Ken. That's interesting. I will say that, you know, a COVID policy looks like it's going to be a really important thing for all businesses to have. Just by way of my experience, as recent as yesterday, I had issued a proposal to a potential client customer for consideration. And a follow-up question to the proposal was, does your company have a COVID-19 policy in place? So we're looking within companies in this conversation, but I could start to anticipate that in cross-business interactions, there's going to be a question or consideration of making sure the people you interact with have appropriate policies in place as well. Well, thank you to all three for your presentations here. Shelby, I think at this point, let's bring back in you back in, and I think you've been monitoring our chat window, and we could start a question and answer period here based on things that might have been submitted.
Certainly. So I had a lot of questions sent to me privately. So the first one I want to throw out there for our team is, in the case studies that were shown, there was a 12-foot diameter displayed instead of the 6-foot that is recommended by the CDC. Can you kind of give additional information as to why that was decided?
Yeah, I'll take the first pass at it, and maybe Melissa or Kim, you can jump in as well. But when we work, many times we are somewhat static in where we place ourselves. Other times we're moving in and about the office. It was our take to say, well, let's go the 12-foot diameter to further enhance and to further provide sort of that safety zone. So it's taking really, I think, the CDC's guidelines that we've all heard about and seen, whether that's in some of the retail that's open now, or even in our grocery work or grocery activities, and taking it one step further, just providing some added flexibility for occupants.
So Ken, if I could follow on that, what you're really saying is, while you could compact it tighter to begin with, there's a little sensitivity here to people who might be concerned about being too closely spaced, and or leaving some flexibility to kind of adapt or meld without immediately encroaching on other margins somewhere else. Is that right?
Agreed, and there may be a reason to limit the overall occupancy for other reasons, and so that might play into that sort of mathematical application of that 12-foot diameter circle as well.
Did I see you sort of suggesting that that's a current state approach, meaning almost like an initial return to work, and could actually be malleable or adapted as the state of the environment evolves or we get past this event. Is that right?
Very likely.
Mhm.
Great, thank you for that. So another question we got asked from John was, are you measuring productivity? And Melissa, I believe that came after your section. I'll throw that at you.
Sure. We did ask about productivity in our survey. It's self-reporting, so we're asking people's perception of, do you feel more or less productive while you're working from home? So we did surprisingly find that a lot of people felt more productive, even though those of us on the committee evaluating the data didn't necessarily feel overly productive, especially with kids at home and things like that. It definitely would be something that would be up to each individual organization to validate based on their data if they're seeing better productivity, if that's something that they track. So we have that included in the survey that's open right now too. So we'll see how people are self-reporting. It's another month into the stay at home, especially for those of us in Michigan that are mostly still working from home. So I'm interested to see as we wrap up this survey if the additional time has been helping people increase their productivity or their perception of productivity because they're getting in the groove of it, or if they're just kind of over it and ready to get back to the office and therefore seeing their productivity dropping.
No, Melissa, just anecdotally, I think there was probably concern on a lot of business leaders' standpoints as folks went home from the office to work from home, that would they really be disciplined, or would they be out walking the dog or mowing the yard or doing all these things that surround you while you're at home rather than focusing on work. And just anecdotally, I think what we're seeing is people are incredibly committed to staying with their work, and the Zoom meeting contact and being able to reach out through Teams or Zoom or Blue Jeans or any of these other sorts of things is actually making them stay close by, and the commitment level is very high. And then the separate work is truly separate because there's not people going by your desk and distracting you from what you're focused on.
Yeah, there's definitely trade-offs, right? But this was an incredible experiment that most of us have tested, the viability of working from home for our organizations. It requires a high degree of trust that things will go as they should. So I think it's been really interesting for leaders to see how that plays out with different individuals in different roles. Some jobs obviously can be done better at home than others. But it's definitely been interesting for people to see how much more they can get done in some contexts by minimizing those interruptions from passersby, but also how we hear a lot about the need to formally schedule time with people when they normally would have just dropped by their office or dropped by their desk has been a toll for a lot of people as well.
I have a question to throw out to the group that's here. I know how our firm looks at working remote and what our expectation is when office is open, but could we hear from some of you guys? Like, what are you thinking? What is your organization considering in the work from home scenario as your offices reopen? No comments?
I'll take a stab at the question. I think it really depends on the culture of the company, and it's kind of a difficult question for us to answer because we obviously have our own companies, but we also touch a lot of other different types of companies. So if you're talking about our personal companies, it really depends on the culture of independent contractors working in an organization that really, whether they're trying to get listings or do tenant rep work. So from that perspective, from a real estate company perspective, we're pretty independent people anyway. So we're working remotely, out of our cars, and maybe just touching, base in the office. The companies that we do work for, it's just a variety of responses. So I don't think anybody knows the answer yet,
Right.
which why this forum is good, because we're all just trying to gather information at this point.
All right.
So another question that was asked of us, and John, I might put you back on the spot here in a moment, but we were asked if Progressive AE is making any changes to designs that are currently in progress. So I would love to hear from our team from a workplace and maybe the industrial standpoint on what that looks like for projects. But then John or anyone else, we would love to know if your clients have reached out to you about making changes as well.
So I'm located in our Charlotte office, and we have had one client who we were ready to start construction documents on their project, and they have completely trashed their design, and we've started over and rethinking their space for them. But the majority of our clients are continuing down the path without many changes. Just the one has really sort of started again.
And I'd say similar in Grand Rapids that we've had a couple of clients pump the brakes on portions of their project. One client was in the midst of, it was a 300-person work environment, and they were literally in the middle of placing furniture orders, and we already had the furniture orders phased. And so they held on the phase of soft seating. They still intend to order all of it, but they moved ahead with ordering workstations and meeting rooms and anything that was critical business to support their employees as they come back. But instead of, they felt it would be reactive, and we supported their decision to maybe change the finishes on the soft seating to try to be more bleach cleanable. So instead they're holding off on that and anticipate implementing that as a third phase later this summer. And that was one way that they're mitigating maybe some of the risk of current needs for reacting to COVID as they return to the office. And then we've had a lot of other clients really trying to look at the long view that the future is going to be different, but we do still believe in the work environment. And so we're looking at airflow, touchless faucets, maybe things like that we can switch out, motion sensor drinking fountains and bottle fillers if we're not already using those, to try to minimize things that people are touching all day, but not as many wholesale changes to design.
Yeah, and as just a peek, as you requested, into the industrial market, I think what I've seen is rapidly escalating conversations around in processing in particular, but even exit processing, so that there's an increased confidence that people coming into the workplace are not sick. And so the scanning of people, as you know, in the food industry and even medical, that's been a high concern of continuity of production. But they've had some, particularly in the meat industries, hot spots of people becoming ill. So there's a lot, we haven't talked much today about checking people coming in. And in some cases, even checking people as they go out, because if you found them to be safe coming in or non-symptomatic, what if they develop symptoms through the day? Well, if you know on the way out that somebody is developing a temperature, then you can actually do quick reverse contact tracing to make sure that you're following where exposure might have led. And then, of course, the standard in industry is trying to get people a little further apart rather than so close together in some of the industries. But that idea of ingress and egress is something we didn't delve into today, but may become more of a standard of just quick temperature scanning to know whether people are healthy or not, to raise everybody's sense of safety and security that the workplace is healthy.
Great insight, David. Definitely not something we had touched on yet, so thanks for bringing that up. And as promised, I would love to hear from you all. So John, I don't know if you want to kind of jump in to start, but we'd love to know if your clients are making changes and reaching out to you.
For sure they are. They're thinking about it. But I think, as you described earlier, most of them are trying to accomplish that through furniture, not through redesign. Looking at heights of panels, looking at plexiglass separators, and things of that nature. I don't think they're looking at reconstruction. We're doing several build-to-suit projects right now, and they're not slowing down on the design. It's really through furniture that they're looking at right now. The other thing I would mention is that, you know, in some of the examples where you're going from, the one I wrote down, you're going from 86 people on a floor plate to 52. They're looking at making sure that the right 34 people that are staying home and the right 52 people come in the office at the same time, because they don't want they don't want to lose the collaboration, the the creative energy that is happens when you're in an office. And so they're really trying to schedule and put a lot of thought into, okay, which 52 people should be in the office on Wednesday, so that it's not haphazard and unorganized, so that they don't lose that collaboration and creativity.
Thank you for that insight. Does anybody else want to jump in? Okay, so we did get one last question, and we want to be mindful of everyone's time since it is a few minutes after 12. The last question of the day is, do we anticipate furniture companies making modifications to design long-term, or do they look at this as a shorter term and not changing the way the workplace is designed long-term?
So I'll jump into that quickly first. I think that's a great question. I think we've definitely seen some highly reactive products hitting the market, pods, literally like self-isolation pods. And I think it's interesting and it's thought-provoking, but our point of view would be that that's a really specific investment that's probably not the best for long-term use. So we've been suggesting to people that they either repurpose things, so instead of having to buy screens, using things like mobile whiteboards that can help protect people from each other, provide a buffer if that's appropriate for the solution. Or like John mentioned, if there are screens or things that can be retrofitted on a workstation for the short term if needed, or a reception desk, then as things hopefully come back a little bit closer to normal and maybe we don't need those, it's not something that you've invested a significant amount of money in a completely unique solution. So I think for a lot of the more reasonable long-term outlook, we've seen manufacturers and companies helping to fill the gap for the short term, easily accessible, shorter or lower investment products and solutions that aren't permanent for the next 20 years of the life of a facility.
Thank you, Melissa. And with that, I think that brings us to the end of our time. I did share the link to the survey as promised during the presentation. That's in the chat box. And we will also follow up via email with you all. But thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to connecting with you all again in the near future.
Yeah, and as a quick wrap, everything will be different. We know that. There's a lot more attention to employee safety and security now, and you know that. Open communication is a must because that plays to employees knowing what's going on. And we know it's a moving target, so you got to be open to change. The last thing I would say is encourage your companies and the folks you work with to get a COVID policy in place, because employees will be looking for that to be comfortable, but even in their interactions with other companies, it may become a standard of knowing who you interact with has an appropriate policy in place. Thank you again to our presenters. Thank you to the SIOR team for making this possible. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate any feedback you're willing to share through this or even separately as we maybe look to how things like this might be of value to SIOR. I think with that, we will say goodbye and look forward to another event. Take care, all.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Progressive.
you.
Thank you, everyone.